Hi all, welcome to another episode of Data Never Lie video podcast, a place where we can talk about data analytics and marketing. Today, I'm honored and pleased to have with us Adam Greco, product evangelist at Amplitude. Adam Greco is one of the leaders of the digital marketing analytics industry. As one of the earliest customers and employees at Omnitor, he has helped thousands of organizations improve their digital properties through the use of data. Adam has blogged extensively about digital marketing, analytics, and authored the preeminent book on Adobe Analytics. Adam has served as a board member of several digital analytics organizations and has won several awards from the Digital Analytics Association. Adam is currently a product evangelist for Amplitude, where he helps leading organizational strategies around using data to accelerate growth. So, Adam, thanks for being here. And could we start now?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
So, first question. What's your vision about the actual state of the analytics world?
Yeah, so I think, after a period of what I'd say is maybe 20 years of relative boredom in the digital analytics space, it's actually kind of a crazy world that we're in right now. If you think about what's happened in the last couple of years, we've had pretty much every vendor decide that they're going to standardize on a new architecture, the event-based model, which is kind of reason why Google then, more forced everyone to move over from GA Universal to GA4. Adobe is going to have to force at some point all their customers to move over from Adobe Analytics to CJA. So I think that's one big thing that's been happening. Obviously, we have the whole privacy cookie deletion stuff going on. That's had major ramifications for a number of companies. But also, I think, and the thing that I've been talking the most about publicly is that we've been seeing a convergence of different disciplines around analytics really come to a head. In the early days of analytics, it really started as marketing or web analytics because most people wanted to see how their Google keywords were doing, and they would use something like Omniture or Urchin before it was Google Analytics to see how are my ads performing. And it was really a marketing based analytics tool. Well, now we're starting to see that you've got product teams that have different sets of questions that they want to understand. That's where the Amplitudes and mixed panels of the world came in. Then you've got vendors like experience analytics vendors. You've got Quantum Metric, Content Square, Hotjar. Companies are helping people visually see what's happening. And then you always had experimentation, and now it seems like everyone in the world is a CDP. So I think what you're starting to see is all of these disciplines starting to converge, and you see lots of vendors adding new functionality. Some acquisitions have happened recently. So it's been kind of like a crazy time over the last couple of years as all of these different factors have all swirled together at one time.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. And the second question is related to the first one. So, this is what your vision about the state of art at the moment, but what's the future of analytics?
Yeah, so I think that in the future, there's going to be a need for every organ. So let me take a step back. Why is digital analytics going through all of this kind of change right now? I think that the fact that people want to see the full customer experience across multiple platforms is really what's driving this. And even taking a further step back, because the world has undergone this massive digital transformation, it is now basically the case that for most businesses, the website or the mobile app is now the face of the organization. I mean, and this was greatly accelerated because of COVID. But how often are businesses these days meeting customers face to face? It used to be that even retailers would have face to face interactions with their customers, but now it seems like even retailers are selling most of their products online. And so I think that that is the big driving factor. And if you think about the future, every organization is going to want to have one digital analytics product that allows them to see the entire experience from the minute someone hears about the brand to them using the digital properties for 6 months or 2 years. And because of that, that's why I think you're seeing such a consolidation, because in the old days, you might have 4 or 5 different analytics products. You might have Google Analytics for your marketing campaigns, the top of the funnel. Then you might have, say, like an Amplitude to figure out how people are using a mobile app. Then you might have a Content Square to figure out session replay. And then you might have Segment, which is collecting your data and building some of your audiences and sending them out. And I think that it's getting really complicated. And I have this joke, I call it a Frankenstein analytics stack, where you're kind of stitching all of these tools together. And it makes it really difficult to understand that holistic experience that your customers are having across web and app. And I think that that is what the future is one platform that can handle most of that core analytics functionality. And I usually define the core analytics functionality as being able to do top of the funnel all the way through experimentation through all the way towards product usage. And so I think it's marketing analytics, product analytics, experimentation, session replay, and CDP. And those are the five that I think are all kind of converging. And I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now, there's only like 2 or 3 vendors that you could choose from, but that all of the sub vendors that do each of these pieces have been either absorbed in, acquired, or maybe faded away.
Okay. So you you told that we have a lot of in this period we have a lot of tools where we can rely on, and maybe industry rely on, and in the next future maybe three big company that bring everything instead of these little pieces and complete the puzzle. But what do you think about the artificial intelligence in the analytics world? Because it's something that we already know something, but people could be scared or they are excited about artificial intelligence. Someone tell us, "Oh no, everything could be erased by the artificial intelligence," maybe like Predator or something like that. Or people are very excited related to how they can use or how artificial intelligence could quickly do something that they manage for hours or days. What's
Yeah.
your thought about artificial intelligence in the market analytics?
Yeah, so I'm not an AI expert, but I have some theories of what I think is going to happen and how it's going to be used. I'll back up by start saying that we've talked a lot about the convergence of different technologies and tools. I always like to bring back to the point that most success in digital analytics has nothing to do with the tools. That's only like 10%. About 90% of it has to do with the people and the process that you put in place. And so I think that the convergence of these tools, it will only be successful if there's a convergence of the different teams that are working together. And so when you think about the teams that are working on analytics, I think there's 2 or 3 ways that AI is going to help. There's obviously a team of people at many organizations that are responsible for collecting data, figuring out what is the right data that we need, making sure that you get good quality data. I think AI is going to have a huge impact into making sure the data that's being collected is accurate and complete. And we're already seeing that. Like at our company, we've started to see that we've added generative AI so that when data is coming in, we can check it to make sure that, hey, if it's a zip code, like it looks like a zip code. We could basically predict, is this data point accurate or not accurate? And we can score it using AI. So I think AI will be a great tool to help make sure you get better quality data. I think that the second way that you're going to see AI is in what I call like anomaly detection, or more expanded is just mining data to look for interesting insights. And as all of your listeners probably know, we collect so much data that you can't open up every report every day and every week and spend the time to go through it and say, hey, I didn't realize this campaign code went up a little bit, this campaign code went down, or this product got more views this week than it did before. You could definitely set alerts if there's like a huge statistical anomaly, like, hey, it went beyond a couple standard deviations. But it's not, it's always reactive for you to go in and do analysis and find kind of little nuggets of insight. I think AI is going to be able to automate that and not come to necessarily the conclusions, but I think it can point you to say, hey, here are a bunch of situations where while you were sleeping, we went through all of your data and identified these are some really interesting things that you might want to check into, kind of like where there's smoke, is there fire? And so I think that's another way that AI is going to be able to help. And then I think the third way that AI can help is really synthesizing reports and large amounts of data and trying to summarize it so that you can move more quickly. And think of it as like a co pilot where you have like this virtual analyst, kind of like in the Iron Man movie, when you're talking to the computer and Jarvis is kind of telling you things. I think it could be really powerful to say, here's a chart, I would like you to summarize this, turn it into a nice slide that I can share with an executive so that it could handle maybe 80% of it, and then you just kind of tweak the last 20%. So those are the three areas that I'm kind of really excited about for AI. And I don't think any of that is worth being having fears. I don't think that loses anyone a job. I think it only augments what humans are doing.
Yeah, great point. Great point. The same for me, but it's something that we need to work about that. But coming down to earth for a quick question related to what happened in July. So starting from last July, we said goodbye to Universal Analytics and start using GA4. What do you think about it? How do you consider that move from Google?
So I'm a little bit opinionated on this, and everything I say is obviously biased because I work for a company that competes with Google. But I honestly would probably say this regardless. I think Google Analytics is an amazing product in that it really helped create the digital analytics industry. Even though there were vendors for old people like me, Web Trends, Omniture, Website Story, they were there first in many cases, but Google really made it pervasive just because it was free and it was kind of the analytics product for the masses. However, what I have always been a little bit perturbed about with Google is that if you have such a monopoly in this space, and I think something like 85% of the world that does digital analytics, at least from a marketing standpoint, uses Google Analytics, I think that you don't get as much innovation because there's no real reason for a vendor to innovate. And I just think that it kind of narrows the way that you think about all the things that you can do with analytics. And I do think that there are a lot of customers and agencies that never think outside of the Google box.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's great for the industry. And now, if you, an example of that is GA Universal moving to GA4. Well, why did they do that? The word on the street is, hey, GA Universal was built on an architecture that just, at some point was not going to last, had to give way. It wasn't on an event-based architecture, which made it more difficult to do web and mobile app. And, the event-based architecture is really that lowest common denominator. And I think that they had to keep up with where the industry was going. And I think that's an example of, companies like Amplitude and Mixpanel, they've had an event-based architecture for 8, 10 years. But there's no reason for Google to change because they had a monopoly. And I think that now that Google has made this change, I think everyone is on the same architecture. And we're starting to see a lot of companies who are saying, are there other options other than Google out there? And maybe I should check out those options. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that the things that we're doing at Amplitude are going to push all the other vendors to innovate. And I think Google, pushes other companies in different ways to innovate. So I just think the more competition, the better for the industry. But I do think um, that too much of the time we're focused solely on if I can't do it in Google Analytics or Google Analytics doesn't do it, then must not be worth doing. And I don't think that's the case necessarily. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's only was this question was only to move the wasp in the jar. So I want to understand the way of thinking of other competitor related to Google. So you told us Amplitude, and you are the Amplitude product evangelist. So, could you please tell us more about the software, the Amplitude, what can do for companies, and what is Amplitude?
Yeah, and I won't make it a sales pitch, but Amplitude started about 10 years ago as mobile analytics, really just doing analytics on mobile apps. And that soon morphed into product analytics because most of the teams that were building mobile apps were evolved into being called product teams. And the problem that Amplitude was trying to solve was very different than the problem that Adobe and Google were trying to solve. Adobe and Google were very focused on acquisition. How do I get people to my site? What campaigns are working? What channels are working? And then what content are they viewing on the website? Maybe a couple paths that they're taking through my pages. But the product analytics industry, kind of led by Amplitude, was more focused on how do we take a website or a mobile app and, as a product person, make this the best website or mobile app that it can be by checking out the retention, checking out the engagement we're getting, trying out new features of the product and seeing which features are being adopted and which ones are not being adopted, cohorting users into different buckets and trying different experiences. And so, in general, marketing analytics or web analytics was always about how do I optimize my return on ad spend and maybe my return on content. And product analytics was always how do I get my return on investment of the investments I'm making in my digital product team to make the best product. So Amplitude started in the product analytics world, but then realized that we need to also play in the marketing analytics space because if you think about it, as I talked about earlier, the customer experience doesn't just include what happens once they get to the website or the mobile app. There's always an interesting component of how did we find them and how do we then remarket to them if we've lost engagement and get them back. And so we kind of moved into the marketing analytics space, but we also have built in experimentation because we know that you're going to want to either do feature flagging or try different experiences. And so we've added that to our product. And then, as we talked about the convergence, when I got to Amplitude, I basically told the team we really need to have session replay because there's times where you can't just find the answer by looking at rows and columns. Sometimes you need to watch people using your digital products to see what's happening, and then we also added CDP capabilities because we have a lot of people who are sending data to us through Segment or Imparticle or Telium saying, listen, we're paying double for our data. We're paying to collect it in Segment, and then we're sending it to Amplitude. We're paying again. So if you think Amplitude is really a product analytics driven organization and it's a platform that has marketing analytics, experimentation, CDP, and session replay capabilities. That's kind of the world we play in. We tend to sell mainly to product teams, but then get brought into design and data teams and marketing teams versus an Adobe or Google that tends to get sold to marketing teams, and oftentimes, product teams will try to get an Adobe or Google to work in product analytics. Traditionally, it hasn't worked super well, which is why like Adobe just came out with a new version of their product called Product Analytics. And one day Google might, decide whether or not they want to get into the product analytics space.
Yeah, super cool. And if you have to select the strongest point of Amplitude, what's your thought about that? If I ask you, for example, what is or are the strong points for Amplitude?
Yeah, it's hard to boil it down to one. I would say that there's a combination of three that I think make us the most unique in the industry. One is I don't think anyone else in the analytics industry goes deeper in terms of product analytics. And that's an area where we think is really important because, as we mentioned earlier, most of the interactions you're having with customers nowadays are through your digital products. Second, we're one of the few vendors, and I think there's only one or two in the industry that has a full platform approach to analytics where you can do all the things we talked about: product analytics, marketing analytics, experimentation, session replay, and CDP. Very few vendors can do that platform approach where you can see the full customer experience without having to stitch together many vendors. And then I think the other things that tend to come up is how easy your platform can do self-service versus forcing people to go through more of like a centralized model where people have to do analysis for them. But we tend to be air more towards the side of self-service. Like we want more people to access data than fewer. But yes, I think those are kind of the biggest things that we see, is just having a platform, but a platform that focuses much more on product analytics than anything else, just because that's where we see the industry going.
Okay, super cool. Again, it's something that we most of the customers search for. I'm gonna say hub for everything in place. And I think the next question is the most difficult question. Do you have any suggests for people working or willing to start the digital analyst career path?
Yeah, well, this one hits home for me because I have a son who's in college and he's looking for summer internships. He's a junior, so he's a year away from his first job. And it's funny, he did kind of like an exam at school, and it told him that the career he should be in is data and analytics, which was kind of ironic being my son. And so I think the advice that I would give him is the same advice I would give your listeners. I think that in the future, the number one skill that is going to be needed is the ability to interpret data and translate data into actionable insights and be able to communicate those insights in a persuasive way to executives at your organization. In my career, I've seen people who get really focused on a particular discipline in analytics, like I'm an implementation person, or I'm really good at Adobe Analytics, and I think that those are great, and you can make a good living doing that. But ultimately, that's something that anyone can do, and that can be replaced. I think the hardest skill set is being able to kind of figure out what is the data really telling me and be able to synthesize that into things that we think should change on the website or mobile app. And I use this analogy a lot. I say that most organizations and I think most digital analysts act like what I call thermometers. And a thermometer is great. It measures things. It can tell you what was happening today, what was happening last week. But I think the future is what organizations need to be, which is a thermostat. And a difference between a thermostat and a thermometer is a thermostat, you could turn the dial left and right, make it cooler and warmer. And I think too many analysts today are thermometers. And you've heard terms like, report junkies or report monkeys who just are running reports. But there are very few organizations that, if you say to any company, and I always challenge every company, and I say, if I look at your analytics team this week, what percentage of the work do you think they're doing was thermometer work versus thermostat work? And I define the thermostat work as using data to find something, to identify a hypothesis, then come up with ideas to solve that hypothesis and try something, implement it, and then use the data again to figure out, was your hypothesis right or wrong? That scientific method is kind of more like being a thermostat. And most people, if they're honest, they say to me, you know what, we're probably doing 90% thermometer work and 10% thermostat. And that's after us having this industry for 20, 30 years. And so if you want to be the most valuable employee in the digital analytics field, you need to be doing thermostat work. And in order to do that, you have to be able to interpret data. You need to be able to create really good presentations. And you need to be comfortable getting up in front of an audience of people and being persuasive, almost like a salesperson. And I recently read a really cool book by April Dunford called Sales Pitch. And it's mainly to create a presentation that you pitch your software product to other prospects. But I actually think a lot of the principles are very similar to internally selling a concept or an idea to executives. And I think that too many digital analysts haven't ever been in sales and they don't know how to sell their ideas. And I think that every analyst should at some point be in sales at some point. Also, they need to get up on a stage at an analytics conference and learn how to get up and present slides and be comfortable with that. I think it's a lot of these soft skills that are more important than being really good at math or being really good at statistics or being really good at JavaScript.
Yeah, you nailed the point because it is likely my vision about that, and it's something that we need to improve on. And so, guys, who is listening this, bring all this gold and take it in your bag and use it for your career. Um, Before we leave in, where we can hear your voice, Adam, like social media or something like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you just search for me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect to any of your listeners and anyone can DM me there. I'm not huge on social, but LinkedIn is my main network that I'm on.
Okay. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks for everything you said about that. Everything is gold. One of the great interview ever. And for you guys, stay tuned for another episode for Data Never Lie, the analytics podcast. And thanks again, Adam. And hope to speak to you soon and meet you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
See ya.